So, how do you make a game like Grow a Garden on Roblox? Well, one of its most important features when it comes to user retention is likely its mutation system. That is, your plants having those nice effects, depending on the environment, and luck of course. And turns out, creating something like this in Roblox Studio isn't actually as complicated. For instance, during our second episode, I created this very simple plot system, allowing people to plant and harvest things, so you can either watch the other one first, or stay with this one for the time being, as I think understanding what happens here will make things a lot easier. But obviously you can also apply this to your existing system. So there's a bunch of things Grow a Garden does. When it comes to mutated plants, for instance, sometimes they're bigger, or other times they have a different color, or some sort of particles to them. So let's have a look at the size aspect first. For instance, there is this update plant aspect of my plot script, making sure the plant is scaled depending on the progress. So we calculate the relative progress, so 80% for instance, as opposed to, 4 seconds in, using an attribute to both calculate kind of the target time as well as obtain the plant time. And we keep it between 0 and 1, so even if your players decide not to harvest a plant right away, it won't grow infinitely. And then we scale the model using this function I go more into detail about in the second episode. So what you usually do if you want to apply a scale mutation is multiply this by 2, for instance. If you want to do this, depending on whether there is actually a mutation in place or an event in place, you could do it like this, for instance. Now for testing I would just apply it every time, so assume every object will be mutated, and this is a very short notation of implementing this. So the multiplier will be 2 in case the event is happening, or in any case, like for this example, or 1 otherwise. So essentially this is just a shorter version of what you can also implement like so, and then we eject it down here. Let's have a look. Exactly, so now it has twice the size essentially, and everything else is still working all the same. And you can make your mutation effects luck-based, for instance. You can also make them depend on a global event, for instance. During the last episode, we were adding this global event system, where there's this boolean value called event active, whose value changes depending on whether the single event we currently got is active or not. Of course, you can also go with various events and save an integer value instead and say, 0 means no event, 1 means like the lunar one, 2 means rain or whatever. But then you can also keep it like this for testing, but you could also get access to this object like this at the very top, in case yours is also stored below replicated storage and it has the same name. Otherwise you can just adapt it here. If you mess those up, you'll get a yellow message saying it hasn't been found after a short while during play mode. And then you can insert the value like so, where .value refers to the actual value, whereas this object, so event value, is just the object reference. If you don't want your if you don't want your mutations to use an event as a baseline, or add an additional random chance to it, you could also do it like this, for instance. So now we get a random integer between 1 and 10, including the 2, and in case it's 1, so we got a 10% chance, we apply the effect, and otherwise we don't. But of course you can also combine the two by putting this in parentheses, and then I think conjuncting it with whether the event is active like we had before. But now let's have a look at how we could handle color changes. So for instance, my plant object is composed of those parts. For instance, we could give the green ones a special name, like by selecting them, by holding Control and changing the name attribute down here. In my case I will have to do so inside this blueprint. The reason why you just saw the carrot scaling up and down is because update plant will still be called even after the event, which will then clamp it back to 1. If you don't want this to happen, you could also set, like if this is true or whatever condition you have, you can set an attribute like has mutation or so, set it to true, and then never set it back to false in case you want it to be permanent. So inside here we could, for instance, create a separate, like a dedicated function, so a code snippet, to have it a bit cleaner, which is going to be responsible for coloring the plant. So we set plant, and then for instance we could say has mutation, or mutation index or whatever. So in our case we call it down here, pass over the plant so it gets pasted, if you will, into this variable, and whether we want to have a mutation. Again, in my case I will make it depend on whether my single global event is active or not. Now obviously this is not the most performant way of doing so, but for instance, every time we update the plant. In our case, we also want to be able to revert it, so this is why we color it. With every update, we iterate over all of its descendants. We don't have to do so, but preemptively, so it includes all of those, let's say, secondary children. And in case it is a base part, so it even has this brick color attribute, and its name is green part, so we don't apply to those as well. Now comes the very short notation again. If it has the mutation, for instance, set it to, I can't find it now, maybe they removed it from here, but we set it to this brick color, and otherwise we set it back to forest green, like this one. Let's give it a try. And okay, I guess they removed the color. Then let's go with another one, for instance, eggplant. Now it is set to this purple-like color, with the other elements remaining with their standard color, like even during this event, as you can tell. I'm not sure if you noticed, but in the original they also had this kind of blue sparkles doing the frost mutation or event, and those you can essentially add to all of your blueprints right away, which I will be doing for simplicity's sake this time. But you can also create a dedicated blueprint inside replicated storage, like we did with the sky or the carrot itself, and then duplicate it, repairing it to all of those attributes, all of those plants it should be applied to, and then then activate it and destroy it in case you want to revert the mutation. So let's drag this in here, and for instance with its primary part, make sure it is actually set here, we can add a new particle emitter, like so. Now for instance we could change its color. You can also give it a separate texture, like you can find in the toolbox. You can access up here. If you set spread angle to 360, you can make it go to all directions if you prefer. Perhaps make it slower. Decrease the lifetime. The reason why it says two values here is because you can set both a minimum as well as a maximum value, like so. Perhaps decrease its rate and its size. Now I'm happy with this one. Let's have it disabled by default by setting this to false and moving the particle emitter into replicate storage in case you would like to go with the blueprint approach, or keeping it inside all of your plants below their primary part, like so. Let's move this back into replicated storage. Perhaps create another function for it. If we again call on here, you can duplicate this line using Ctrl Shift and D and just change the function. I think I want to rename it to apply particles, which I can do like this. And then this time around I want to access the primary part as long as it's set in here again, like this. So I temporarily store it below here, get access to its primary part, and wait for the particle emitter. You can also access it directly, and you can also go with wait for child here, and after this check whether it actually exists in case you don't we want to have this only for some of your objects. And then we can set its enable stat to has mutation. This time we can just pass the value. So let's check it out real quick. Particles activated, and there we go. And now the emitter stopped emitting, as you can tell. Now it started again. Awesome. But one thing Grow a Garden does is also give you a slightly different harvest if you actually harvest it during the event, or again after the event in case it is applied permanently. So inside your harvest function, for instance mine is here because I'm using a proximity prompt, I wait for its, or I connect to its triggered event. We add a new item, so for Roblox you use tools there to the player's backpack. And here you can do it the same name, but this time since I want to change multiple lines, I actually feel better by using the long notation, if you will. Like do it like this, and now I can make the respective attributes depend on whether the event is active or not. So for instance, if it isn't supposed to be mutated, I just go with the carrot standard name and set its value to 2, and if it is, I use twice the value and also use a dedicated name for it. And you don't have to do it this way. Maybe you also have a completely different tool blueprint inside replicated storage, like the way I do here inside my premium template, like Grow Garden like template you can also find in the description. But the reason why I set this value attribute here, so there we got our mutated plant. So maybe to complete the sentence, the reason is because that's what my shop system here is checking for. So now we get $4 as opposed to just 2 with the non-mutated version. Great. So perhaps to show you real quick, here you can see the player's balance. It's an integer value, so we again use .value here. We increment that directly depending on the tool's value stat. Again, I go more into detail on all of this in my third episode, I think it was, in the playlist. And this is a simple way to add mutations to your Grow Garden like game. Inside the playlist you can also find an episode dedicated to how to create a simple leaderboard like this one. But honestly, I think with those games it usually comes down to a combination of gameplay depth as well as social features, like those daily rewards here and also group rewards we're gonna take a look at next time. Probably daily rewards to keep it simple. But of course there are also a lot of different aspects to it, like community management and so on. We might be discussing in the future on this channel. Anyway, have a nice one. I can't wave, so I will be showing you my shovel now. And yeah, see you next time.